Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. It's your classic busy August edition because not only are we previewing Norwich City's championship meeting with Coventry City tomorrow, we're also taking a look at deadline day, which I'm sure hasn't passed you by. A couple of situations that Norwich fans will be well aware of that their club are working on, and we're going to have a look at a couple of those. First of all, the Slimani signing, which looks like it's edging closer and is very likely to happen today. Secondly, the search for a right winger, whether that's going to happen and what profile of player Norwich would like to have in that position and what profile really would suit them tactically, and maybe discussing some of the weaknesses they have that somebody in that area could fulfill. So we're going to come on to that. Rest assured, we will talk about transfers, but we're going to start at the CBS Arena and the test that Coventry will provide. I think it's going to be a really interesting one. And although Coventry haven't started amazingly, it's been sort of a mixed start for them. They will certainly feel that they can be in and around that playoff mix, maybe even that promotion mix. They've got a good squad of players. They've obviously been working together for a long time and getting almost closer and closer every year. Of course, they fell towards the last few hurdles last season, but they had that fantastic FA Cup run as well. Looked like they were making strides in the right direction, and they've gone and recruited pretty well this summer, I think. Obviously, they've lost Callum O'Hare, which is a significant loss. He's gone to Sheffield United, and I think Norwich fans could see how talented he was when he came to Carrow Road the other day. But they have got a squad that can cause real problems, and I think Norwich will have to be at their best. But I'm going to start with the 11 that I think Johannes Torup will choose for the game. Here it is. I've got Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Shane Duffy and Jose Cordoba at centre back, with Callum Doyle at left back, Marcelino Nunez, Kenny McLean and Amankwa Forson in the centre of midfield, with Ante Cianats on the right, Borja Sainz on the left, and Josh Sargent on his own up front. Now, I think most of that team speaks for itself. Of course, the squad could look very different by this time tomorrow. But I think with how late any business now will be, not only is there the element of registration and whether the club can get things over the line in time for someone to feature tomorrow, but also the fact that Torup likes players to have training minutes in their legs before they play for the team, and the fact that there will be quite a lot of uncertainty around those players going into the game. I'd be surprised if many of them are up for selection. I think Slimani and Kamara are probably the two that you'd look at as those late scenarios. Kamara, whether he'll be in the building or not, sort of remains to be seen. It does feel like Hull especially are getting towards the figures that Norwich want for him. But if he does stay at Carrow Road, which Torup said yesterday at his press conference was a distinct possibility, well, he's supposed to be up for selection, Torup said, but I think it will be tough for him given the sort of circumstances around it. And I can't see Norwich including him in that group, given how they've dealt with things since his transfer request. So I haven't got Kamara in there. I think the other interesting situation is that left back, centre back debate and how Torup gets his best players in the team. That feels like the one that's rumbled on since the start of the season, really. And I've gone for Duffy, Cordoba, and Doyle in that mix. I thought Torup was very interesting yesterday when Paddy asked him if he would play two left-footed centre-backs next to each other. He was very, very open about that and said it's something that we might see in future. But that level of openness and almost how obvious it was, Torup speaking about it, I would be surprised if he had in his head that he was going to use it tomorrow. It just felt like a little bit too much of a nudge and a wink for me. So I'm expecting to see Cordoba and Duffy alongside each other. And I actually think after last week's performance against Sheffield United, that makes sense. And it does give you a few strengths and the ability to deal with a few things. We'll come on to Coventry and some of the strengths and weaknesses that they have. But I think against Coventry, it gives you a few different elements that they might need. Obviously, you've got Duffy with the more physical element, maybe knows the slightly darker side of the game a little bit better, has the experience of the league and also more generally. But Cordoba brings that quality of passing, that calmness on the ball, that athleticism running in behind. And I think Coventry actually can cause you problems in both ways and can sort of mix up how they test your defenders. So I think it's important that Norwich try to deal with both of those. and Duffy is probably their best old school aerial physical defender. Cordoba is probably their most athletic defender, best at defending in behind. And although it was a tough debut for him at Crystal Palace, I think Norwich fans saw the signs of the player that they really love behind the scenes. And I think it's only a matter of time before he comes into the team. So I've gone for them there. At left back, you have to get Callum Doyle in the team is basically the reasoning for that. And I know it feels like maybe at centre back he gets on the ball more, and he probably does slightly. But Torup's setup means that that inverted fullback does get a lot more of the ball than your typical wide, high fullback. And I think if that wasn't the case, there would be a real discussion because you want Doyle in there, you want him on the ball as much as possible because we've seen the talent that he has and how useful he is in the build-up, the technical ability that he has. And Torup's spoken also about the ability to go in behind slightly more directly, and he does have that sort of good pass into the channel that can hurt teams. But I think that's the best way for Torup to get all of his best players in the team. Again, I'm probably trying to work out the best 11 just as it feels Torup is at the moment. And I think we will see clarity in the next few weeks over how he sees that defensive shake-up and who that consistent centre-back pairing is going to be. But just right now, given how he spoke in his pre-match press conference, I'd be surprised if he goes for two left-footers straight away. Coming on to Coventry and some of the strengths that they have, I think the problem that Norwich will have and the strength that they have going into this one tactically is that they really can mix it up. They've got Ellis Sims as an option as sort of their striker, and he is your typical old-fashioned number 9 who will hold the ball up when it comes long, will be physical, will try to win aerial duels, maybe won't run in behind as much or make as many darting runs to test the defence. And in a way, I actually think that would suit the Norwich defence, especially Shane Duffy and probably also Callum Doyle if he was starting at centre-back. They dealt with that really well against Kiefer Moore, who is a similar profile of striker. And I think with the lack of players going in behind for Sheffield United, that was actually one of the reasons why Norwich were able to limit them to not too many chances. So I think Mark Robbins might have a look at that and decide that that might not be the best approach. And if so, he's got Brandon Thomas Asante, who they brought in this summer, scored his first goal for the club in the Carabao Cup against Oxford in midweek. And he definitely is more of that profile where he can get in behind. He's got a bit of pace to test the defence athletically, and he does have that sort of more nuanced, clever movement that will test their, I suppose, concentration in the box and their positioning. So he has two of those different striking options. That's why I mentioned Duffy and Cordoba and the fact that you probably do need slightly different things to deal with the different threats that Coventry might provide. And actually, I'm not sure we'll know what sort of match it ends up being until that team news comes out at about 11:30 tomorrow. But it will definitely be an interesting matchup. I think that striker central defensive shake-up is probably where a lot of the game will be decided. There's also Haji Wright, who plays off the left but comes inside a lot and will test the centre-backs with those runs in behind. And I think they might have to deal with both that physical aerial threat and the more athletic threat, which is why I've gone for those two centre-backs. I think Callum Doyle does have the ability to win those headers as well. So Norwich are pretty well set up. But I think they need to have Jose Cordoba in there to be able to deal with the runs in behind as well, because there will be a lot more of those than there were against Sheffield United. So those are some of Coventry's strengths and some of the ways that they might manifest themselves tomorrow. Now we're going to move on to transfers and the bit you've all been waiting for. We'll start off with Anis Slimani, who there has been a lot of talk around the last few days. Maybe not the same level of excitement that there has been around a few of Norwich's other signings this summer. I think probably the fact that Renier Jesus from Real Madrid was a target earlier on in the summer. That deal hasn't ended up panning out because they wanted Slimani in this midfield position. And I do think he brings a lot of strengths that Norwich maybe don't have there and that they do need if they want to play Torup style. He's got that ability to take the ball in and turn quickly in midfield, which I think is the sort of defining characteristic when you look at a Mankell Forson and how he fits in. Both of those players are able to take the ball under pressure, beat players, and end up in open space in midfield, facing the opposition defence, most importantly. And it's not a very common skill actually in today's game, because so much of it is about avoiding risk, about keeping possession, about not wanting turnovers in dangerous areas. A lot of midfielders will drop deep, just play the almost bounce pass and change the angle from one centre back to another. And although that does have its role a bit in terms of setting the tempo of the team and moving the opposition around, it doesn't ultimately find that pass that gets you into dangerous areas, that starts off attacks. And I think Slimani is able to do that, because if you can get someone who receives the ball short, turns, beats a player, goes into space, then you don't need to have a centre back who necessarily every time is able to play the Hollywood pass or find a pass straight into the striker's feet through a sea of bodies. And they do have a couple who maybe are candidates for that, looking at Callum Doyle and Jose Cordoba, but that probably limits the need for them to do that, and also the risk for them passing straight through midfield, trying to find the striker. And I think that is something that Norwich need. They don't have too much of that. Slimani does bring that, and although I think it's taken him a bit of time to acclimatise to the speed of the English game, there's definitely a lot less space in midfield than there is in Denmark. I think Torp will back himself to turn him into a good player at this level who can operate under these circumstances, because part of the reason he was brought in was to improve players. Of course, he'll know a lot about the minerals that Slimani brings to the club, and that the qualities that he has, because he will have seen him with Brøndby in Denmark. Of course, they've competed against each other when he was the Norwegian manager, and I think he'll back himself to make the most of those talents. Slimani also brings a bit more physicality, which I think is lacking as well, and probably has been lacking for a while. A lot of people have been calling for that sort of traditional number 6 midfield destroyer who will stay in a defensive position and screen that back four. And I don't think Norwich are going to play like that under Torp. I don't think they're going to use a player like that. I think they want all of their midfielders to be slightly more dynamic, to be offering up passes, and to be almost interchanging and defending together. But they still need a bit of that physicality, because you look at the likes of Nunez and Forson, and it doesn't feel like they have too much of that. Kenny McLean does have that a little bit. He probably is still also better as an 8, but I think it's just him really, and then Jakob Sorensen, who obviously we know has the injury problems, who can play that slightly more physical role and ease players off the ball. But Slimani is good at that. He can also protect the ball very well when he's got it, and he can help halt opposition counter-attacks. He's got that physical frame that really helps him lever opposition players off the ball, and I think that will help Norwich, where they're asking these midfielders to play a bit of a hybrid role between attacking and progressing and trying to create chances, but also coming back and being that defensive solidity together, because they aren't going to be playing with that old school number 6 type player. And I think Slimani helps add to that mix what Norwich maybe are lacking a little bit in that midfield. So it looks like an encouraging signing, probably some adaptation needed when you look at how he struggled with Sheffield United. Admittedly, he was in a very poor team in the Premier League, but I think this Norwich team will suit him slightly better, and this style of football will suit him slightly better. The other area that Norwich are looking at is right wing, or a winger and attacking player. Of course, they can be sort of interchangeable, and Torp has spoken about that. He didn't sound overly optimistic about the idea of getting one in unless Abu Kamara leaves yesterday, but it is an area they've been active in. Had a loan bid rejected for Rabi Mutondo, saw themselves priced out of a loan for Jaden Anthony. And it looks like they are attempting to recruit that style of more direct, more chalk on the boots winger who can take a player on and then likely cut the ball back in Torp's system to try to create chances. And I do think that is what they need, because in Jonathan Rowe, they've lost a player who can create those moments, who can take on players, force the issue a little bit. And although they have got options out there now, like Ante Cianats, like Gabriel Forsyth, none of them are that direct winger who really will be physically taking players on, trying to outpace them down the line or anything like that. On the other side, they've also got Borja Sainz, who looks like a nailed on starter almost every week. And when you've got him playing that inverted, more modern, wide role, you probably do need somebody else out there to sort of shake it up. And I think we saw that actually under Daniel Farker in the 18-19 season. They had all these lovely technical players who could pass the ball around quickly and could create chances. They had Emi Buendia on the right to basically operate as a number 10 off the wing. But on the other side, they had Ono Hernandez, who really mixed it up, who would take it to defenders, would cut inside, shoot, try to create chances on the outside as well. And I think that blend is really important in an offensive style if you're trying to mix up the test that the opposition face. Of course, they do still have Hernandez, but with Sainz, it seems so far ahead of him in the pecking order on the left, and Torup seemingly seeing him as a choice on the left. I think on the right, they need that slightly more direct option to be a more clear replacement of Jonathan Rowe. And also, if they lose Kamara, he isn't as much of a direct or pacey or physical winger as Rowe, but he does have that ability to take players on, to beat them, to cut inside, to take them out of the game, and to show individual brilliance. And I just wonder if Norwich, losing quite a lot of that individual brilliance if he goes, would need somebody to create those moments a little bit more. And I think if they are after a winger, which it seems they are, and if they are able to get one, then it's important that they can add a physical profile in that position. Of course, we'll have the whole day covered, and we'll have that pursuit covered as well. So it's worth heading across to pinken.com for all the latest transfer news and updates. Of course, we'll also have the Coventry game covered and analysed throughout the weekend. So just in case you've forgotten that one, that is also taking place tomorrow. Thank you for joining me here on Tactics Board. I'll see you very, very soon.